Hey y'all, my name is Cassie and I am the creator of Pieces of Scrap, and today I wanted to do another video similar to my last in this series where we look at free patterns on Instagram and rate them and kind of give an idea of what to expect when you're doing those patterns, because I don't know if you're the same as me, but I kind of wish that there was somebody out there reviewing these free patterns to kind of test if they are worth doing to make for markets. So before we get into my ratings and feedback about these patterns, I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about how and why I rate things the way that I do. So first off, I rate these patterns based on if I would work on them again, if I would use the pattern again for market prep or for a commission, etc. It really kind of ties into the difficulty of the pattern and how quickly it works up as well. All of that is kind of tied into if I would use the pattern again to make another one. So the second thing is the level of clarity in the pattern. If I am having a hard time understanding what the author of the pattern is trying to tell me to do, I will rate it lower, because the more clarity you have in a pattern, the less difficult it's going to be for any level of crocheter. And finally, the third thing is if I end up liking what the patterns look like at the end, I will rate it higher. Typically, if I spend a lot of time working on something and I don't even like what it turns out looking like, or it looks nothing like the picture, I will probably not like the pattern and will probably rate it low. So those are all the factors that I take into consideration when I rate my patterns. So the first pattern that I tested is this squishy whale, and as you can see, he already has price tags on him. I just finished pricing all of these guys for a market prep video. I have a market this Saturday, and this video will come out after that market recap video. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you go watch it. So anyway, this is the squishy whale pattern by Coffee and Crochet 01. This works up just under 20 minutes at 19 minutes, and I loved making this pattern just because of how quickly it works up and how cute it comes out. I especially love how the little tail flippers in the back come out. It is a sewing pattern. This is the only part that you have to sew on. You have to make two of these little fins and sew them on. But the creator of the pattern was so clever because she placed the tail right where you change colors from white to your blue color or whatever color you choose, so you can hide that little transition there. It's amazing. It was such a good idea to do that. I don't have any complaints about this pattern, so I'm rating it 5 stars out of 5. That is our first 5-star pattern, and I've been making so many of these. As you can tell in the background, I've made 2 of each of these colors. So I have 6 total. I think these are great little stocking stuffers for my markets coming up. I have a fall market this Saturday. It's our peanut festival in Grapeland, Texas. And then I have a Christmas in Crockett market coming up, and I'm sure lots of people are going to be looking for Christmas presents for little ones, and these just make really awesome stocking stuffers. And I'm pricing each of these at $6 each based on the time and the materials. It's very good pricing for these little guys. It's a good price for somebody just trying to find something small. The next pattern we have is the Axolotl Squish by Absies Makes. It's Absies_makes on Instagram. This pattern took me 36 minutes to make, so another really short pattern. And as you can tell behind here on the shelves, you can tell that I really enjoyed this pattern as well, because I made 4 of these in 2 different colors. It's a really nice pattern and it's really easy. It's a no-sew pattern. The gills on the axolotl's head are crocheted directly onto the head, so you don't have to sew them on, which is really awesome. The only gripe I had about this pattern was that her bobble stitches are a little different. So the top bobble stitches where the hands are smaller bobble stitches than the bottom bobble stitches, and she considers the top one a mini bobble stitch. But what threw me off is I had initially just gone through the pattern and I did a regular bobble stitch here, and then I realized that what she writes out in her instructions for the mini bobble stitch is actually what I knew as a normal bobble stitch. For the bottom, the feet bobble stitches, there are 6 loops on your hook when you pull through all of them to make the bobble stitch, but for the top ones it's 5, and I'm used to having 5 on my hook for the normal bobble stitches. So once I got up to the arms and went into the instructions to read what the mini bobble stitch said, I realized that I had to work backwards and fix these first before I could work on these. So that could have contributed to some of the time. If we were considering that I had to frog to the legs and redo the legs and then come back, that probably would have been 5 minutes or so, so about 30 minutes for the pattern. So I would give this pattern a 4 out of 5 stars. So next up we have the Budgie, and this is a pattern by Amigurumi Morgan. This pattern took me 53 minutes to make, and I absolutely love how it turned out. The biggest part of it that I love so much are the wings. You add these feathers at the end just by chaining and then slip stitching back into the wing. So they're super easy and they're super adorable. I absolutely love how those wings come out. He sits up so perfectly, how the feet are positioned on his body, and he doesn't look like out of whack at all. And I would give this pattern 5 stars out of 5. Another 5-star pattern in this video. I know, it's crazy. Then we have the Dandelion by Crochet by Chelsea. This little guy took me an hour to make. I had a little bit of issue with this pattern, mostly around the ears. It tells you to work the ears into the front loops of row 7, and the thing that threw me off is that once you get to the end of the pattern and you're sewing the petals onto the face, it tells you to work the petal that goes behind the ear into that back loop of row 7, and I just didn't know that, so I had already crocheted into the back loop of row 7 to build off of him to make his body. So I kind of wish there was like some sort of note that said, don't crochet into this, you need it later. But that's not such a huge deal. I was still able to place the petals, and it doesn't look like it's in the wrong spot or anything. One other thing to note here is I ran out of the green for the body about here, so I just transitioned to kind of look like he's just wearing a costume, like, and it's just his butt isn't covered by the costume, I guess. Another thing that I didn't really like about this pattern is there isn't like a lot of instructions about the tail. She shows a picture of the tail right next to the instructions of the tail, and I think she only gives instructions for 2 rows. So you do a magic ring and then you do single crochets around the magic ring, but there's no instructions about how to do the petals of the flower on the tail. So I had to kind of figure it out on my own. And had I done the petals around the face prior to doing the petals on the tail, I probably would have done the petals on the tail a lot more similar to these. This was really easy to do, whereas this was it kind of looks mismatched, and you can't really tell that that's supposed to be a flower on the tail. Her flower looks a lot better, but then again, I have no idea how she did it. There's no instructions about it. That being said, I think this pattern is awesome to use just as like a base for cats and lions. I may use this pattern again in the future, I may not. I'm kind of not really sold on it at this point, but I would give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And finally, we have the Chubby Dino by Studio Phoebe 22. This was a really cute pattern. I love how it turned out. You immediately can tell, you work from the head down, that this is the head and this is the body. Some patterns don't really tell you where you're starting, they just tell you to start, and you don't know if you're starting at the top or the bottom. I'm pretty sure this one did tell you that you're starting at the top working down, but even if it didn't, it would have been very obvious to me, because you make this kind of circular oval shape up at the top, and then you start working decreases in the front of the neck here, and it's really obvious that you're working on the head and that you'll be working on the body later. This pattern isn't no-sew. You have to crochet the legs and the tail and the spine separately and sew them on afterwards, but I don't have any complaints about that. It turns out really cute, and I don't know how you would achieve that without sewing them on, unless you were to be chaining. Similar to the Brontosaur pattern by Kaylee Crochet, how she does hers, she chains and leaves a gap, and then you work around that chain as you're still working on the body, and then you come back later and you single crochet directly onto that hole to make the tail, the legs, etc. This pattern took me 58 minutes to make, and I used a 4.5mm hook. The rest of these patterns I used a 3.5mm hook. I used a bigger hook for this one because I'm working with a little bit chunkier yarn. This is a Bernat Baby yarn, whereas the rest of these either use Himalayan Dolphin baby yarn or parfait chunky yarn. This one's just thicker, so I ended up sizing up my hook, and I also wanted it to be a little bigger because I knew that I was going to be spending a lot more time on it, so people find more value in amigurumis that are bigger if they're paying more for them. So that is something to consider when pricing this guy. I priced him at $16.
So I forgot to rate this pattern. I give it a 4.5 stars out of 5 stars.
So overall, a lot of good patterns this time. There weren't any patterns behind me that I did that I wouldn't revisit in the future. Like I said, the dandelion is the only one that I would kind of question, but I think I would come back to the pattern in a more minimal way where you're trying to make a cat or a lion instead of the dandelion. The tail was the biggest issue with me for that one, but the rest of these patterns were incredible. I would recommend them to anybody who is looking for a pattern to be working on. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this was helpful for you when you're looking at patterns on Instagram and trying to figure out what you want to make. These are some patterns that I would recommend, and I am so happy today that I didn't run into a pattern that I just absolutely hated or had any sort of major difficulty with. These were all fairly easy patterns, and I would recommend them to any of you who are looking for new patterns to work on. If you liked this video, make sure to give me a thumbs up below and leave a comment about what you want to see next. If you have specific patterns that you look at on Instagram that you would want me to test and review, let me know what they are. I'd be happy to test them for you. And if you aren't subscribed already, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me if you would subscribe. I make new videos every Friday, and I will look forward to seeing you next Friday. Y'all have a great day.